Hello, this is Jarlo with Occupy Detroit, waiting on a conference call to listen to and eventually have a conversation with Victor Candu Houston from the original Black Panther Party as he discusses fundraising techniques and activism of the movement of the 60s with the Occupy movement. Please stay tuned as the conversation has already commenced.
That we had, and we start to talk to them and get their support and their cheers. It was very easy with all that enthusiasm that we were generating into the crowds, talking about revolution in America, that they would reach in their pocket and passionately donate to the cause. It was very serious times. The war in Vietnam was going on. Americans were demonstrating all over the country about internal issues, and any kind of progressive organization doing anything to help the people from a grassroots level got millions of people supported it. I see the high tide of the movement again, and so I think that those tactics that were incorporated back then would work well today. And it looks like the same forces are lining up against each other, the far right and the left. And I would think that the Occupy movement would be defined as being somewhere from the center to the left, if anything. Definitely not right-wing.
Indeed. Now, of course, you got your nickname, General Can Do, because of your organizational abilities. Can you tell us a little bit about, for example, organizing New Orleans?
Because I was the original Panther, we only had one office on 45th and Grove and no other office nowhere else in America. I have a unique experience to see the party grow from a nucleus, from I'll say 200 Panthers that would walk in front of the office. The office was so small they couldn't even get inside all of them. And we had a Panther house behind that office. A lot of the members would congregate there. But it was at an incubation stage of the Black Panther Party. And that's why I'm so confident that these things work, because I saw it when we were at a lower level and grew to a higher level. And from that perspective, I look at the Occupy movement and see you struggling to stay afloat and continue with what you're doing. And I think that you're basically at that incubation stage as the Black Panther Party was in 1966, 67. And as a matter of fact, a lot of organizations also learned how to organize in the grassroots, fashion, raise funds to put on even more events. And the key thing here is getting the support of the people. For example, can you imagine advocating all types of progressive things that the Occupy movement is advocating? Yet still the masses of the American people don't see you do one practical thing that's showing you real love for the people. You're not giving away anything in practical terms. All you're doing is talking. You must develop some type of practical programs, and the people must know it's coming from the Occupy movement in order to get their support.
Right, that would be like the community programs that the Panthers had, such as the kids' breakfasts. But tell us about how you organized the New Orleans chapter.
I'm sorry, John, you didn't mention. Well, the Central Committee of the party, you've been a national organizer for the party. I've been sent to Sacramento after they shot that office up to put it back on its feet. Then they ordered me to go to Denver after Landon, Williams, and Roy Heights were kidnapped out of the Denver office. They shot that office up. They were holding them in the Denver County Jail. They were charged with the murder of Alex Rackley in New Haven, Connecticut, which was just some conspiracy charges. Erica Huggins, Bobby Seale, Landon Williams, and Roy Heights the Black Panther Party chapters, we set up NCCF offices around the United States, and I set up that one in New Orleans. It basically was the same as the Black Panther office. When the news media would talk about it, they would refer to us as the Black Panthers, not the National Conference to Combat Fascism. I had to work under the constant surveillance of the FBI, local and state police, even when I got that office up on the Irish Channel in New Orleans. So I saw the assault come in on the office, and I quickly picked another office down in Ninth Ward. That's where Katrina hit really bad. There were projects across the street with 80,000 black residents. And there was a black bookstore, and there was a big area on top of the bookstore. So I took that as an office, and there was a huge open field of fire on the left side of us. It's an open field, so standard procedure was we would secure the offices for police raids. So we sandbagged the office, we put screen over the windows so they couldn't shoot in the tear gas, and we trained the cadre in military tactics, how to use weapons, how to clean them, how to shoot. This was standard procedure in any Black Panther Party office during that time. If you remember, we probably had over 50 shootouts with different police departments. And matter of fact, that same office, we go shoot it out with over 500 New Orleans police, and didn't one person get wounded. Every day I'd send my 26 or so hard cadre members of the party downtown on Canal Street, and I'd give them 50 newspapers or 100 and a donation bucket for the breakfast program or our health clinics. And they would stand on a corner, one person on each corner in the intersection, would be four person. They could watch each other back from police harassment. And the general public would walk by, put in their donation. They knew the Black Panther Party were feeding hungry school children, and people supported that. And so all our support financially came from the people. We didn't get any grants from the government, wasn't any state, local, federal money. It was all done by the love and support of the masses of the American people. And I think that the Occupy movement can basically do the same thing, John. But like I say, they must practically show that they care about the American people and launch some programs that fit the ideology of what the Occupy movement is about. That's what I suggest.
All right, so the learning there is that by showing the love to the people show the love back to the movement, and both grow together. I think this is probably a good point to start opening to questions. Steve in Nevada has his hand up. Let's turn on your mic.
Hi, Victor. Thank you very much. That was quite informative. Tell me, Victor, something that was really remarkable about the Black Party, or about the Black Panther movement, to people that were observing it from third-party status, just the average American, was the discipline that you all had amongst your members, both the personal disciplines as well as the organizational structure and the political education you went through. How important do you think that was to the movement?
It was very important. What's your first name again? I'm sorry.
Steve.
Steve, it was very important, Steve. In this sense, when we committed 24 hours to being members of the organization, we had to live communalistic. Otherwise, we had houses, and men and women would be stationed in different, we call them Panther houses. It'd be places to eat and sleep. So here we had problems with, say, some of the male members interacting with the females. So we had to give political education on male chauvinism so that there wasn't any liberties being taken with women. We had to adopt principles, guiding principles, so people would be respectful toward other comrades, and we could function together without fighting amongst ourselves. For example, we would teach members that instead of saying we were having an argument when we discussed things, we called it an ideological struggle. The word ideology means your way of thinking or my way of thinking. So me and you are not arguing, Steve. We're having an ideological struggle. And so things like that, members were required to read 2 hours every
I noticed that there were, you bet, and there were actually articles being written in military journals, U.S. military, the Air War College, manual and the Army War College manual, about the unit cohesion that your discipline instilled in people. Your membership, the cleanliness of them, the politeness of them when they were walking through communities and inner cities, whatever. That built.
We went to church on Sundays. We used to go to Glide Memorial over in San Francisco, Cecil Williams Church. And we also had a concept that we didn't always have the leather coats and the berets on in the combat, but we would dress like the people.
Now that's all a challenge. Not that we need to be quite as disciplined, but that's been a challenge across the country in Occupy movements because the complete embrace of open democracy makes it very difficult to have the hierarchy that the Black Panther movement did that can say, Victor, you go to New Orleans right now and get a property, set up the thing and do it. We're at the stage of trying to figure out whether there's a need to move toward organization at some point. I yield.
I was thinking about that the other day, Steve, because I think at some point where the government challenges you more, it will be a need for more organizational tightness, and also your security, because the more effective you become in getting your message over to the American people, the more repression will come down on the Occupy movement. That's guaranteed. I mean, we saw what happened last year. I'll never forget the scenes at Davis University. I'd been to Davis way back in the 60s, and to see those young students getting pepper sprayed like that, it really upset me. Brought flashbacks, but San Francisco State, S.I. Howakawa. You remember him?
Oh, we all remember him. At least us older ones do. Remember, though, that not everyone on this call is quite as old as we are. You know what? Just to give a perspective, why don't you just mention how big the Panther movement was, how many members it had, how many sympathizers?
Over 48 branches and chapters, about 7,000 domestically, and then when Eldridge and Huey and other members like Bill Brent went into exile in Cuba, Don Cox, Field Marshal Don, they moved on to Algeria and to Paris, France, so we had international sections. The parties was fed by the U.S. government, and this was very interesting to me, and I thought about this years later, that we were actually the first real revolutionary since 1776. Remember, the Chinese government gave the Black Panther Party an official invitation to China in 1971. I just posted something to the DPRK today, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, about launching their rocket. And so we had that type of political clout in revolutionary countries where Huey was received by Chow and Lao, Eldridge, Captain Robert Beatty went on to North Korea. We got the literature called Juche, which means self-reliance and arduous struggle. So the party grew into a very international organization, in addition to the 6,000 or 7,000 members and supporters that we had here in the United States.
So the 7,000 members were actually the 24/7 cadres, in addition to the probably millions of sympathizers.
They were quite a few. When someone says that you're left, it doesn't really mean that you're politically left. You might have taken a stand against the war in Vietnam because you didn't think it was morally right. It didn't mean you were on the left. And so, over the years, certain types of political positions have been defined as being politically left. I mean, when Michael Moore, for example, first got involved in politics, he was a Detroit auto worker. He just used his common sense to figure things out, and he decided to choose this political camp versus the other because he thought that was wrong. That didn't necessarily make him a lefty, as a lot of people
Seattle? Your mic is hot?
Hi, is it up there?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is it raining in Seattle?
Beautiful and sunny. I'm sitting in the park near the fountain, and it looks great. And I have a feeling that
this World's Fair 1968 in Seattle.
Well, I have a feeling that I'm probably near the same park where Aaron Dixon and some of his Black Panther comrades were drilling here in Seattle back during that time. And I wanted to mention a couple of things here. One, just for the sake of transparency, I'm also a journalist. And I wanted to mention something about, well, first of all, I wanted to say that although the Occupy Wall Street movement has encountered mostly non-lethal weaponry, most folks don't realize that there have been raids on occupied buildings in Seattle and other cities where SWAT teams, heavily armed SWAT teams with assault rifles were involved. So I just wanted to let people know that sometimes it can be kind of frightening. Besides the tear gas,
marches up there and how vicious that was, so I believe it.
Yeah, people in Seattle are definitely have a taste for tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, batons, and the rest. And currently we're involved in a huge battle for free speech on college campuses here, because one of our most activist oriented schools, Seattle Central Community College, has been trying to pass a bunch of anti-Occupy rules about demonstrations in a reaction to our encampment at the college, including protest signs can't be more than 3 by 5 feet, et cetera, et cetera. So we're fighting really hard in Seattle right now.
Is it Scott? Is that your first name?
Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. Mark, let me just say this. On the point that you made about the encampment, I've been wanting to suggest to the national Occupy movement that they advance and develop their tactics to not just occupying locations, but to start doing more rallies because of the control that you have when you throw a rally in a big park, security that you can have for the people participating, the general public and the cadre that organize the rally, versus the difficulty, especially with logistical problem, and setting up somewhere and just occupying. Otherwise, be a little bit more versatile in your tactics, trying to get your message over. So start doing rallies, some marches, and continue to occupy. Mix it up.
Well, I think that's exactly what's happening. As a matter of fact, the occupation at the college ended in December, and since then, the individual working groups have been working specifically on a lot of really intense political and social issues. We have affiliation with the Occupy Everything movement, so there is free food being served from Occupy Seattle. Of course, that's been going on ever since we had our encampment, and it also includes a lot of our own, providing food to a lot of our own participants.
Did when they marched to the container port, which is the second largest in the world, and tried to shut it down.
Yeah,
Know about that? In Oakland, my hometown.
Yeah, we had our own confrontation here in Seattle on that day as well.
But I want out there is that they weren't occupying that particular action, otherwise remaining in a fixed position in tents and being defiant. But they got up and they walked, they moved, and they hit different targets that they thought was relevant, like the shutting down the port. And so I think that these were starting to develop and be more diversified for tactics with the Occupy movement. Also, I remember in New York when they marched across the Brooklyn Bridge. So I think that although the Occupy movement started with that one particular tactic, it's a good idea to mix it up and get more creative in how you bring about pressure on Wall Street.
I can definitely say that the logistics, the tactical support, and the security involved, having an open encampment at a public space somewhere is very daunting and difficult. And we all here across the country struggled with that. creating...
Okay, listen. You remember Woodstock?
Yes.
Who doesn't remember Woodstock? So here's a suggestion. If you do something similar to Woodstock, right, where you find some land that someone who supports you own and holds your huge 3 or 4 day political event and let them camp there. Now you've ruled out police coming on private property, beating people upside the head and doing all types of fascist things. There's another good solid strategy I think the Occupy movement could take from what happened in the 60s and think about Woodstock, except make it more of a political event than just music and people sitting around dancing and smoking marijuana.
I agree that would be a good idea. That was one of the options that Occupy Seattle considered last year when we were being evicted. Two of the options at that time were to find a building that had been abandoned, which we did. However, we were immediately raped by a SWAT team and physically forced out of that building.
I'm especially suggesting this because of the security that will bring. Remember, we had to do the same thing, and our message was a lot more provocative to this government than what you're talking about. We had buttons saying "off the pigs," okay? We were putting a poster showing people putting a knife through what looked to be a police officer's heart, but flies buzzing around them. And so we definitely had to be able to organize to reach the people without, every time we got out in the street, the police, tromp us with horses and shooting us with tear gas. And so you got to get smarter than this. And I think that there's lots of land, especially in this country. So your organizing has to take in the security aspect when you do it. Don't just keep putting yourself out there like lambs to the slaughter. So they can come in and say, well, we got to clean up Zacardi Park. And so everybody got to go and giving them reasons to beat and pepper spray and arrest you. You see? And so around that.
It seems like there has been a direction change, and I've seen it around the country. It's definitely happening here in Seattle, where Occupy Seattle has become more of a support group for other community campaigns, and I really like that idea. I think it does
kind of feel, Mark, listen, how about a national Occupy conference to be held somewhere, National Occupy Conference with workshops on organizing, and so that this way you can unify your actions if you hold a national conference. Otherwise, people from Seattle and New York and all over the country will come in a big convention center. We held a national conference to combat fascism in America at the Oakland Auditorium, and thousands packed that place. We held a revolutionary constitutional convention in Philadelphia. We got thousands of people to come to that. So you need to have some national conferences, and that's another way to very effective organizing. You have a 3-day conference somewhere and let all the occupied people around the country converge on one location for an inner Occupy movement organizing session. Otherwise, that is out. Go ahead.
That is exactly what's happening, my friend. There's been a call out for a national convention, and by the way, we've already had a series of regional
conventions. I get better than conference, yeah.
Well, they're actually calling for a convention on July 4th in Philadelphia, a national Occupy convention. So that's exactly the kind of thing that you were talking about. And I have seen how the regional Occupy movement conferences have brought people together in a way to help coordinate national movement. So I think that is a great idea, and I hope that people from all over the country show up in Philadelphia on July 4th, because the Occupy Philadelphia people that want to host it. So I want to be there.
And guess what? And when you hold that convention,
grassroots is really the only way I think the Occupy Wall Street movement is going to survive and grow, and I think most of us realize that. That's why a lot of the supportive efforts that have been happening, hundreds of Occupy people have joined the marches against the killing of Trayvon Martin. There are Occupy groups that are holding hunger strikes in California right now in support of people who are losing their homes because of home foreclosures. And there are all sorts of supportive efforts going on with local unions around the country where the Occupy movement isn't necessarily coming in and saying, this is our event and we're the people that we want to focus on. We're actually trying to reach out to all sorts of organized communities and work with them directly as a support group, not as the people in charge. And I think that's really helping build bridges. Really a wonderful thing to see.
That's a very thing that I perceive in the first 30 days when this Occupy movement started and went worldwide. I was loving every minute of it. I couldn't believe it was happening. I mean, you can imagine from my perspective of being around in 1968, and I remember huge rallies over at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And just, 500,000 people showing up to protest the war in Vietnam, and daily rallies that they had in San Francisco State with the San Francisco Tactical Squad beating people half to death. And so when I saw, we use the term that the movement is on a low tide, but now it's on a high tide again, like it was in the 60s. And I'm sure that they're going to be confronted with some of the same obstacles that activists in the 60s were. And so, before you go, you put something ahead of the road, and I think organizations and people will be much better off. The support is there. People all around this country support your movement. I do, other organizations. All this stuff is interrelated in America, trying to alleviate itself from this oppression. We must get control of this country before they lead us to destruction. And this imperialistic path that America is constantly taking will do that. Domestically, the big picture in the Trayvon Martin killing is that there will be more murders by the police around this country. As a matter of fact, there's been 28 shootings by the police killing mainly of blacks since the Trayvon Martin murder. Although this has a big focus right now because the controversy around it, I feel like Akia Boyd, the young black girl, 22, that was killed up in Chicago, that her life is just as precious as Trayvon Martin, and McDade, the other little young 20-year-old who was shot dead in Pasadena, California the other day, and other Americans who will be murdered in the future. And so that's another issue. I think the Occupy movement, since they care about the American people, and not just the aspect of Wall Street, but other methods of suffering in this country. And I think that's when we all come together. And I realize that this Occupy movement wasn't just about battling Wall Street. They were about battling hunger. They were about battling who created the AIDS virus. You know the government did that. They were about battling the end to these imperialistic wars and getting young Americans killed and killing innocent people abroad. And so you basically were like a reincarnation of 1968 to me.
All right.
John, is there anybody else who wants to come on?
Yeah, let's move on to other questions. Kasha back there.
It was wonderful talking to you. Connect with me on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Victor?
Yeah, this is Jay.
I'm trying to ask you. I wanted to ask.
Mark. Mark?
No, Mark is already.
Mark, send me a friend's request.
Okay. Yeah, he's on Victor Houston on Facebook. Now we've got Kasha Baxter and James Lattimore.
That sounds like a female.
Hello, Victor. You mentioned before about the importance of the cadre and the Black Panthers, and speaking to them on an organization, a movement now that describes itself as the leader of this movement. And so, what is I agree with you about something that might resemble a cat is important in moving forward, but how do you resolve this commitment to a leaderless philosophy? Check.
Okay, well, for example, when I work with the Fort Lauderdale group, what I notice is that the various participants had various levels of commitment. Some were very hardcore, and their passions were involved in the movement. And then there were some who were a little bit sometimey and maybe would come out sometimes, but then there were others who were there every day, who wanted to just, if they could, spend all their time working with that Fort Lauderdale group. And so I think you need to pull all your hardcore people who have time to give basically 24/7 of their time to that particular branch or city of Occupy, and that would be basically your cadre definition, those who are willing to give lots of time towards your movement in that particular city. Otherwise, that'll separate, the people who you would actually call members of your cadre and those who were casual activists who come around every now and then, because some people are passionately involved. I mean, they want to work at this every day. It's their life's work.
Let me address your question.
Yeah. No, not really. There is still such an issue. This is Tasha.
Hi, Tasha.
Hi. It would be nice if we could just say that we'll have some people go, but that's not the way we're working. I'm really afraid that we're going to lose a lot of this wonderful energy we're talking about because, A, we don't have the media coverage that folks used to have back then, because they know how to do on the media. We just have this idea that nobody is going to speak for us, so no one can tell anybody what to do or suggest or lead anybody. So it's really very different than the power you're talking about, and I check.
Well, Tasha, listen. You can have a collective leadership. That means that you all decide and you still move under one thought and one thought of action. You don't have to have a president, vice president, or captain, lieutenant, sergeant, or section leader. You don't have to be set up like that. Then you can still have what you call organization. It's just a description of your leadership, a collective leadership, instead of individuals being designated of having certain power to give orders to the other. And I think that's beautiful too, because everybody works in unison, and nothing gets done unless all of you agree on it. And so you can function like that.
All right, I'll take your word for it. Thanks, dude.
Okay. And I
All right,
think that
one more question if we can.
go ahead.
Okay, Diara from Occupy Detroit.
Hi, yes, how are you doing from Detroit here? We've been given a bill... Huh?
Who's speaking?
This is Jarlo from Occupy Detroit.
Jarlo? I heard the Detroit part. Your name again? I'm sorry.
Jara Low.
Jarlo. Go ahead, Jara.
Yes. We have been given a building that we have turned into an Occupy Detroit community center and rehabbed with union support. Tomorrow we're going to be setting up tents in a neighborhood that has been targeted with blight to bring national attention to what is essentially our state takeover of our city. We have thus far maintained an unusual peaceful relationship with our police in Detroit. For example, we blocked a dumpster from parking to evict a family from their home. The police were called and they left, stating that it was a civil matter. This isn't typical of the national movement with the police relationship. Do you foresee a time when this Occupy movement, unified by a nonviolent stance, will have to become educated in methods of combat and defense and arm themselves? Do you think we can maintain a movement without such defense?
I think that the Occupy movement is taking on the same political issues. issues that other revolutionaries are in opposition to, but they might be using a different method. And so our method might bring the FBI, the CIA, the National Defense Organizations, the local and state police in a more violent way toward us because they know we're armed. But at the same time, even though you're not armed, but you're effective, like Martin Luther King was. He was practiced the concept of nonviolent political activism like Mahatma Gandhi, but they still killed him. They still beat him. So as long as you're taking on those same issues, if you're going to be against this upcoming war that they seem to be brewing to go to Iran over, wanting Israel to spark it, I'm sure the right-wing forces will be out there beating demonstrators. Maybe won't get as bad as Kent State where they shoot students to death for opposing the war, but and then it might be necessary at that point for you to defend yourself because you just don't know how people are going to react. Look at the Allen West calling members of Congress communists. I think you're much farther to the left than members of Congress. So you can imagine the mentality in the conservative camp. And so tell us what they will do. One of the things you need to realize, if you don't already, about the far right, they are violent, they are criminals, they commit murders against political activists, from a John F. Kennedy or Robert Kennedy to a Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, and you basically are taking on the same stand that those men were. So it might be necessary, the deeper this thing gets, that develop some type of defense mechanism for yourself. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. I appreciate the input. Thank you.
I want to hear more about Detroit. Don't go away.
Okay, what do you want to know?
Come on now. You're the first woman to get on the line.
Well,
I want to hear more about that. I have a girlfriend that went to East Lansing.
okay.
So I'm glad to hear. And the Black Panther Party chapter in Detroit, they shot it out with the Detroit police. I know you remember that.
Oh, yeah. I do remember that.
And one of the biggest riots in the country in the 60s was in Detroit.
The race riots in the 60s, that's right.
Yeah, and American auto industry, Michael Moore, you're in a very, very powerful political, controversial state. What plans do you have currently as the weather gets better up there for Detroit? If I can ask you.
Sure. Well, of course, we have our May Day actions that we're planning from all different,
May 1st?
yes, from all different grassroots contingents. We're unifying with other activists and activist organizations within the city. We have recognized that it's important not to isolate ourselves or think that we're the end-all, be-all. We have to make and build relationships. So we're doing an inter-grassroots organizational activist rally on May 1st.
With police brutality in Detroit.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, in regards to the Occupy movement and police brutality, that's what I'm saying. We are kind of different. We stand alone. We have not had any police brutality. Not while we were camping in the park. They actually brought us pies and food and ordered us pizza. They were walking through our camp. They were always very cordial. Now, we were camped right across the street from the Office of Homeland Security. So a couple of people got pulled in there, you know, every now and then. But it always remained peaceful. And
Did you see the billboard sign that somebody rigged? It's called Trayvon Martin, the N-word, the other day?
yes, going into Dearborn. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure Detroit has this element of hate up there. Well, sounds great, Diara.
Yeah, and like I said, we've been given, I'm sorry. Like I was...
Not only is the movement of Occupy nationally
Right.
So I'm not quite sure. I think that in this convention or national conference that might come together, so many intelligent minds around the country, somebody's bound to find a way to have a nucleus of unity amongst all the groups around the country so they can support each other.
Exactly.
I think that's a great note to end this portion of the talk on. Victor, what we normally do at around this time is we just open up everybody's mics. We've already had a few dropouts because they're used to doing that at 10 p.m. It becomes sort of like a party line. Now, the speaker can stay on or leave. It's completely up to the speaker. You're welcome to stay. If not, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for a very interesting discussion.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to open up everybody's mic now.
I'm Joe from Binghamton, New York, and I'm just wondering what role social networking sites might play to help advance the movement. Maybe as far as like Facebook, Twitter, or something like that? Exactly. You're saying it start revolutions in other countries, but I wonder how effective it is. Security, that's what you were referring to. And I thought about how in Egypt, the government claimed that it was the internet that had caused all of that upheaval over there. And I don't know about in Tunisia. I think that's where the first one was kicked off. And but in the United States, in this country, even though people are communicating all over the country, I can't see where, other than being informed, but I don't see where it's caused thousands to run in the streets in any particular city so far. But not to say it couldn't happen. Would you like to see that happen?
Yeah.
Well, actually, from Occupy Detroit, on our Twitter account, we're getting about 1,000 followers a month, and we've been in communication through Twitter with Occupy Nigeria, Occupy Senegal, Occupy Spain, Greece, Australia. We've been in contact with Hawaii, and we're getting all kinds of networks built through our social media and Twitter account. So,
you know, you bring up something interesting. You guys heard of George Soros, right? Yeah. I'm wondering why the multi-billionaire George Soros, for what he stands for, hasn't kicked in a few $1 million to the Occupy movement. Good question. I think somebody should try to contact him. That's a good idea. As far as your fundraising, he normally donates millions of dollars to people who he thinks are on the same political page as him. That would be a good move.
This is Mark in Seattle. I'm sorry, this is Mark in Seattle, and I want to say that Twitter and Facebook and other social networking websites, including our own Occupy Seattle website, has been an amazing way to get the word out quickly. I mean, I'm saying within minutes, sometimes seconds, of an event that happens. For instance, we'll stay up all night watching the live stream in New York City, and we'll be tweeting to our friends here in Occupy Seattle, giving them a moment-by-moment update of what's happening. So the one thing that it's done for us is it's allowed us to get information out that normally wouldn't get out through the corporate media, and also be able to stay on top of stories so that people who do want to plan solidarity rallies or solidarity actions around the country know exactly what's happening. I mean, within minutes, sometimes. In Seattle,
It's the same thing, Mark. It's great, too. I think it's great.
it helped to organize the Occupy Oakland solidarity marches in Seattle because we knew exactly what was happening in Oakland. So within hours, we were marching through the streets here in solidarity. And I don't know of a time in the past when it's been that, when the information has been exchanged that quickly all over the country and all over the world. It's pretty powerful.
I think that it's actually working in the United States now. We just haven't looked at it like it was Tunisia or Egypt, because if you think about it, I think it had an effect on people massing and rallying around the Trayvon Martin murder in Sanford. A lot of that Martin's organization. I forgot the network that he has, and that's an example of what you're talking about. So I think it's actually already working. I just don't think that we're getting out there trying to tear up anything like they're doing in Egypt, you know. But America definitely being informed, Mark. You're right.
The alternative media has been very good too. Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, Tom Hartman, Dr. Cornell West, all of these people that are really good at allowing a platform for occupiers on their programs and in the media. So it's been really important, I think, for us to stay in touch with them too and always be feeding them the last minute information. You know, we act almost, Occupy Seattle Media Group, like a
Anybody sees Danny Glover, tell him Victor Houston's trying to contact him. The last time I saw him, Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Did an interview with him on the Black Panther mixtapes, and he helped co-sponsor that. So I'm trying to contact him on some issues dealing with the film I'm trying to get produced, Enter the Panthers. You'll see that on my Facebook page. But I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
It just seems like the Occupy Seattle Media Working Group has become a 24/7 news media outlet, and our job, and mine included, is to immediately retweet, immediately post on as many Occupy Facebook sites as possible and get information out. And it's been really easy, actually, at times, to get things directly to the Occupy Wall Street Facebook site, which has, you know,
Down in Portland area, Portland, Oregon.
yes,
Right below you.
yeah, we have friends down there for sure, and there have been some coordinated actions where we'll go down there or they'll come up here. So yeah, we're very, very strong. The movement is very strong in Portland, very strong.
I think that the compartmentalization of the Occupy movement around the country, that the power is there, like you said, the strength is there. And I think that when you have these national conferences and conventions, I just got a feeling things are just going to come together naturally in terms of getting more organized, just as it did in the very beginning. I don't see this movement dying. I see it getting stronger and getting more organized. And like Bobby Seale used to always say, you're going to go from a lower level of organization to a higher level. And I think there's enough passion, strength, and commitment from the various activists around the country that they're not going to let this go. The government would like to see it die. There is a national conspiracy to try and neutralize the Occupy movement. I'm sure of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're worried about where it's going to go. And so with the upcoming presidential election, that's another good question. What's the stand on the two candidates running? What position is the Occupy movement? They're not voting? Are they commenting on Obama's second term in office or what?
Well, here in Detroit,
Might answer that?
here in Detroit, there is definitely like a different contingents. In the Occupy movement here in our city, there's communists, socialists, anarchists, Dems, libertarians, a little bit of everybody. So, you know, we aren't able in Detroit to come out with a unified statement because we come from such a diverse background.
Okay, I believe that.
There's been some people who have thought that the Democrats were going to try to infiltrate us, and actually I think that we should infiltrate the Democrats because we could take over the Democratic Party. We could really do that. And then we
Another key factor everybody should consider this
I'm interested when you when you started the movement with the Black Panthers. Was there? It seems like in our city there was a large interest. There were thousands of people coming to our GAs, and now the numbers have kind of dwindled down to a stable couple hundred. Did you have the same experience? Did the numbers grow and change and shrink, or was there a succession in one direction or the other?
Well, the more the repression was, the more intense the repression by all the fascist forces in America, especially the police departments, the more support that came to revolutionary organizations or any type of organization that was fighting against this government. And that's why I say I see things on the high tide again now. And so there was just tons of support pouring in from the masses of the people. They were being victimized in every form and facet that you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, I understand about the support. Our support has kind of changed to, when we were more visible in the park, and I think that's why a lot of people are interested in having another encampment. We had a lot more support when we were out there. There's been an illusion that we've kind of been disappearing just because we don't have our presence in the park like we used to. And so we're setting up another encampment in the neighborhood.
And that's okay. Everybody anticipated the cold weather, especially in the northern part of the United States. Not that the committed persons weren't still around. It's just that logically we needed to wait till the weather warm up because of the tactic of occupying. You can't put a tent up out there and sub-degree below weather. So don't feel any way because you haven't physically saw people in the street. Look what time of year it is. What's the temperature in Detroit right now?
This morning it was 33. The high was, I think, 48 today.
Now I'm in El Paso, right on the border, and it was 89. It was 92 degrees today. So what I can do here, you can't do in Detroit because of the weather conditions, and the weather needs to be taken into consideration when you organize things. Also, what time of year you're going to hold the event, the location, and another thing. For example, now Fort Bliss is here. I'm surrounded by thousands of soldiers. They just moved the 1st Armored Division here. And they are the major contributors of both wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Also, as we debate the immigration issue in the United States, I'm right here in front of Juarez, Mexico, the deadliest city in Mexico with all the cartel drug violence and killing 40 people killed a day, 30 people killed a day. Bullets have come into El Paso here and hit the City Hall and University of Texas in El Paso. I had a radio show here for months until I laid heavy criticism upon the police after the Oscar Grant murder in Oakland. So they censored my show and then ended up suspending me off the radio, But if you hold a rally here, the anti-war rally, it has more effect in different types of dynamics because all the soldiers are here. When you talk about the issue of immigration, border security, they've held several border security conferences right here at UTEP with Janet Napolitano. I've been to a couple of them, Alan Bernson and all the rest of them because I'm physically located here on the border, and I've been thinking about holding national conferences on anti-war concept of what's taking place because they're getting ready to go into Iran. America's going to have another war on their hands. I think everybody has enough perception to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in a town where there's thousands of soldiers, and it just has different dynamics. If you were to hold a conference or an anti-rally here in El Paso, Texas, and the weather permits, it's pretty warm here all through the summer, and I'm close to 11 hours from Los Angeles, or if I go the other way, I'm 12
Right. Yes, we're gonna shoot for May. We're shooting for May right now. But actually, our first small encampment, like I said, is going to be in a part of the city that's very blighted, and we really haven't made the public announcement of that location yet, because we don't want to have any force show up before we get set up. So that's going to happen tomorrow.
Fort Lauderdale occupied. Why don't you do this up there in Detroit when the weather warms up, okay? And not so much just focus on setting up tents and occupying somewhere, which is just grueling with the logistics to do that. But you want to get your message out what the Occupy movement is talking about. So start throwing more political rallies. Find a park. Find somebody musically that everybody loves. It'll bring thousands of people. Give away some delicious food. And then you'll be able to raise some money, talk to people, and being more in control in terms of the police trying to disrupt your activities by holding more rallies. Rallies were the main organizing tool in the 60s, more so than a march.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a good thing. Start rallying. Start getting that Occupy. We're going to get the committee to raise financial funding. Like you talked about George Soros. Did you read Rob Nader's book about only the super rich can save us? The book, The Rich and the Super Rich, but I don't know about the only the. It makes sense. I guess Soros did that description. But I mean, there must be a lot of people with money on the left that you can do some fundraising to. Maybe we need to make a committee, a national committee to do fundraising. Yeah, that's assign people to. There's just so many things you can do. But again, I think that in each chapter or city, each Occupy movement, a hardcore element will eventually be carved out of that group. Otherwise, people that's really committed to the struggle. And the ones who just there playing around, they're not really serious, don't have their passions involved. They'll just, end up disappearing along the wayside. Then you'll have your cadre, and then once you got that hardcore commitment of a group, just all different types of things that you could do. We found out that with even just 10 or 20 members, you can organize a whole city with 20 people working together. Leafletizing, organizing different events. There's just so many things a small, dedicated cadre could do. You don't need a lot of people. And because your support is going to come from the people. But as far as those that's out there doing the work, it'll all pan out. You'll be able to see who's committed, who's not committed. And I'm pretty sure that the FBI and the government has sent in different agent provocateurs, like the Fort Lauderdale office. Someone donated them some office space, and they were doing great. They had a little office to go to, and matter of fact, that's where I gave the teach-in. And then some little cuckoo guy did something really stupid right across the street in front of the property, and the guy who gave me the property had to cancel and take it back. So there's going to be some inter-organizational problems with a lot of cuckoo for Cocoa Puff people coming around, so you got to look out for that too.
Hey, Victor, I'd like to ask you one thing. This is Kasha and Occupy Asheville. What do you think the Occupy stands for? Did you hear me, Victor?
The last part.
Oh, I'm wondering what you think the Occupy movement stands for.
What do I think it stands for?
Yeah, what do you think?
State of the New York General Assembly on one of my blogs. It's called Occupy Defense Force. If you look that up, you'll see, and I've read the whole concept of what they stand for. I can't recite it right offhand, but I liked almost every
That's why he pulled the troops out of where they were, so he can repurpose them for Iran.
Jump on Iran next.
Yep.
But they give North Korea a carrot, and they give the rest of the countries a big stick.
Right.
Because remember, one of the characteristics about imperialism is that they're cowards. They only jump on weak countries with a lot of money in the ground. Oil, bananas, pineapples, whatever they can get.
This is John. I should mention at this point that next week we're going to have Judith LeBlanc of the National Peace Action Coalition on. She's going to be talking about plans for the Counter Summit for Peace and Economic Justice in Chicago. That's the one that is there to coincide and protest against the NATO summit. That'll be hot. Yeah, it should be.
John, I didn't know you were still around.
Oh yeah, I'm just listening.
Okay. That's because you're sitting there being patient.
Do the different occupies that are on the phone, do you guys have people going to the NATO summit?
So where's it supposed to be now?
In Chicago, May 18 and 19. Yeah. I think May 18th and 19th. Now, I know that before Lauderdale, there was one guy who was on before, but who since dropped off.
I heard that about a month ago about that NATO thing, but the location where they're holding it, I couldn't help but to think about Chicago, and wow, that sounds like it's going to be a pretty big event.
It should be. It could have been bigger. They had also planned the G8 summit at the same time, but they moved that over to Camp David.
Right.
Yeah, and it's going to be real interesting because this is a movement full of live streamers and people using social media, but in Chicago, those rules are different. You cannot, it's a federal offense to videotape a police officer. So, I hope all the different contingents around the nation realize that when they go there, that they don't set themselves up. There's different ways that you can videotape and record and live stream. Like they have these glasses, these sunglasses, you never know, but they're only $100. We're sending people out with some of those, but you've got to be really careful that you don't get yourself into trouble that you didn't bargain for going to try and live stream at that conference.
I think those laws are going to be tested soon.
Thank you. Thank you for that info.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Isn't it interesting how almost in every facet of political life, we're always constantly being confronted with fascism by the police department, whether it's an individual crime like against Trayvon Martin recently, or brutality against Americans exercising their First Amendment rights. We constantly see police as our opposition to various things that that's capitalism and imperialism, the first line of defense in order to try and rid ourselves of this evil in this country. We always get confronted with the police, not even so much the Army, the Navy, and the military forces, because that makes up the American people. But
that's generally true, but we should make an exception to one thing here, and that is the Trayvon Martin case. The police actually wanted to make the arrest. It was the higher-ups, the mayor's office, that told them not to make the arrest. I actually went to Florida for about
having a revolution, because we know the racism in this country is institutionalized, and also the corruption is very much institutionalized too. It's in every facet. Average district attorneys anywhere in the United States never want to prosecute a police officer, and it's always found as justifiable homicide almost in every murder. I mean, look at Taisha Miller out there on Riverside. That's just ridiculous. When they murdered that girl.
This is Mark in Seattle. This is Mark in Seattle, and I wanted to let you know, Victor, that the Seattle Police Department was under an 8-month investigation by the Department of Justice for racial profiling and excessive use of force. The Justice Department Department came out with their recommendations accusing the Seattle Police Department of a practice and policy of using excessive force. So that's what we're dealing with here. We had a brother named John T. Walker that was killed. He was basically executed by a police officer here that started a whole movement against police brutality. And people are getting arrested at the city hall holding sit-ins demanding the resignation of the police chief. So I just wanted to let you know that it's a serious issue here in Seattle. And so-called progressive liberal Seattle, we have the same issues with the police forces that they have in the rest of the country.
Yes, that's right. And the other thing is that I know you know, Mark, several police departments in the U.S. from Los Angeles to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Oakland have had the federal dissent decree put upon the police, telling that city and government that they failed in their duty to protect the citizens that they swore to protect and serve, and now they can't be in any type of leadership in their police department. They can't hire, they can't fire, they can't make their own financial budget. They just completely taking it out of their hands. That's how bad it is. Several cities have got the federal dissent decree put upon them, and it looks like Seattle's next.
Well, the police guild and the chief were very resistant to even the Justice Department's findings. They called them ridiculous. But since then, I think that the mayor has probably put a lot of pressure on the police chief to conform with the DOJ recommendations, and so it looks like maybe they're finally starting to stop, or they're stopping this process of dragging their feet all the time. Because I don't know what it's like in other cities, but in Seattle, whenever the police guild's contract comes up for renegotiation, they always use any kind of reform or civil rights issues as a negotiating tool. And the bottom line there is that they say, if you try to force us to reform ourselves in these ways, we will strike, and there will be no police enforcement in Seattle. So I think our mayor and our city council are over a barrel when it comes to that kind of issue, and I really resent them using, issues of civil rights as a negotiating tool for a union contract. I really do.
What the earlier caller pointed out was very important. The fact that it's not just the abuse within the framework of the police departments in the various cities in the United States itself, but it's the district attorney's office, it's those judges, it's the whole system that play a part in the repression that people are receiving, because the police know that they can go to the district attorney and say, hey, don't prosecute that officer. It's just like in California, the Department of Corrections, which, California has a huge prison system. You remember the fight that they were having with Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Right.
The hunger strike.
Yeah, and then they have their lobbying groups for the Department of Corrections in the various police departments around the United States. They're very much interconnected with the whole system of justice, from the judges, the DA, the whole system. And so if it's not a breakdown in one, it's a breakdown in the other. And so
my problem is that civilian overview boards are never given subpoena power. Not only that, but no police officer is ever criminally prosecuted for these deaths. They're usually just taken off the police force and let go. And that's
why, Mark, people come to the conclusion that the only way that this evil government will be straightened out in the final analysis is through an actual revolution. Because they've tried all those avenues of peaceful ways to resolve this, of human ways to resolve it. And they continue to see, the fascism by this government through their police department. And after a while, you remember the Students for Democratic Society and the Weathermen, Bernadette Dorn. You remember that group back in the 60s? They developed the same way. And they got to the point where they just didn't have any faith in trying to use any rational ways of dealing with the government, because they just realized just how criminal these people were. We got to realize that these are the same forces that are murdering activists. You remember Sal Mineo? He was making a film about the Kennedy assassination. Somebody stabbed him right through his head with a big Bowie knife. life is dedicated to it. That the people that you're up in opposition against, they're very criminal-minded. They're killers. And so we can use all of these non-violent tactics and constantly try to use humane methods of solving problems. And then, just like in all countries where people were oppressed, eventually you'll come to the conclusion that the only way to remove these obstacles is that you're going to have to fight them. And that means you might have to pick up a weapon and shoot at somebody. And a lot of people aren't at that level yet. I've been at that level for 40-something years. And I'm more than convinced now, because here it is, almost 50 years later, just the Carter Commission report. That was the federal government's report about what sparked every riot in every major ghetto in the United States. It was a racist police officer shooting some black teenager to death, or a Puerto Rican, or a poor white guy. Like in San Diego, that happens a lot. And so they're still committing these murders. And as far as activists, like the Occupy movement, they're still beating anybody that's politically left, spraying them and trampling with horses and bean bags and rubber bullets. And so it's the same old crap. It's the same old enemy. And so nothing's changed in terms of but this country is so divided. They hate each other enough to kill each other. It's happening. And so I think things are going to get worse before they get better.
Well, on that hopeful note, we're going to end this call because we're past the time.
Okay.
Victor, thank you so much for spending time with us. For those who want to friend Victor on Facebook, just look for Victor Houston. You can't miss him. And good night, everyone. See you next week.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Victor.
It's nonviolence, but I don't think we want to be involved with the political process because it's not working. Thank you.
Amen.
All power to the people.
Power to the people, Victor. Solidarity. I'm going to friend you on Facebook tonight.
In Detroit, I'm gonna come cook a meal for you.
Yeah, come on. We're having an ox roast Saturday. You're invited.
I'm gonna cook you some of my jerk chicken.
All right. Come on down.
All right.
Diara, what you said before sounds interesting. I may contact you and write an article for Op-Ed News about that, okay?
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye. This is Jarlo from Occupy Detroit on the phone with Victor Can-Do Houston from the Black Panther Party and several other Occupy members signing off. Until next time, welcome to your world and solidarity.